Hello, everybody, and welcome to the United Stand. I first of all want to say I'm so sorry that we're a little bit late. There were some technical difficulties behind the scenes, and thank you everyone for being here and still being here and ready for the interview. We've got loads to get into, but Ben, thank you for being here as well and giving us this update.
Yeah, absolute pleasure to be here. I'm actually in America following pre-season at the moment, but looking forward to talking Manchester United.
Yes, that is the one. So first of all, I just wanted to get started. We're going to talk about transfers. We're going to talk about Haaland. We're going to talk about loads of stuff. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was the update that you gave us on the takeover last night. It was a really good update. You spoke about this deal being very much still on. Can you just explain where we're at now in the sale?
So the takeover process is not paused. I think that's the first thing to make very clear. And even though the groups have felt in limbo, sources are indicating that there's two very distinct and different sides. The groups feel they've not got any communication from Rain, but sources close to the seller are still saying that both groups are not as ready as they are implying. So yesterday I was told from 9-2 Foundation that they feel they're ready to go, that their vehicle is ready, that the legal box techs are ready. So if someone says to 9-2 Foundation right now, you can enter into the completion process, they're ready. And then, of course, they would need further approvals, including things like the Premier League owners and directors test. But they feel that they're ready. So it's about now the Glazers simply saying, you've got the green light. But on the selling side, there is indication that more is needed to be in a position for the Glazers to make a final decision. So we can read into that either that the limbo is gamesmanship to try and get another round of bidding, or alternatively, the groups have just got a little bit more to get done. So from Sir Jim Ratcliffe's point of view, we know that there's some problems regarding the structure of the bid in terms of getting board approval. So that can take some time. They still say they're in the race. And from 9-2's Foundation's perspective, it's still about, is the vehicle actually ready? Because even though they've got all of the necessary paperwork in terms of holding companies in various geographical regions, the actual vehicle itself doesn't have the funds in it. So they've still got a little bit of work to do as far as the selling side are concerned as well. So we basically got two completely different narratives, which is not in any way uncommon for this crazy takeover process, whereby the groups say we're ready. Why haven't the Glazers let us know what's going on? And those close to the Glazers are saying the groups are the ones still causing the delay, and we're doing our best to get it done as soon as possible. But all sides are still saying that the process is active. And yes, no sale is one option within an active process, but the groups are still engaged in the process, which tells you that the Glazers are determined sellers. The question is just at what price? And if they don't get the price, are they going to pivot and go towards a no sale?
Yeah, I mean, I get the update and I get where we're at right now. Thank you for breaking that down for us. But one line that really kind of stuck out to me was when I read your update last night, was the line that said the Glazers are still determined sellers. A lot of people were very worried that the Glazers, could back out of this sale maybe and keep hold of the club. Is it looking like they are willing to sell?
I think they've always been determined sellers. That's never been up for any kind of debate. It's just about whether or not the right price is hit. So this is only about money. If they stay, it's because they feel the club is more valuable at a later point. And if they go, it's because they hit their number. And that's part of the games of the process. So this isn't sentiment that would keep two of the Glazers or all of the Glazers at the football club. It's the fact that they looked originally at the Chelsea sale price, and they were told and thought themselves they could get 3 times the Chelsea sale price, which is where originally numbers like 7 or 8 billion materialized. Now they're finding that there's a lower valuation and there's been a lower volume of suitors. And when you add those two things up, you can understand why the Glazers are disappointed with the process, because they entered into the process with a higher number in mind. You could call that greed, or you could say that they were badly advised. But whatever the reality is, they've not got the number yet. And this is why it's taking so long. So when they look at the club's valuation in the future, they feel that with the expanded Champions League and a brand new Club World Cup, which is also expanded, they can make more money. And then if Erik ten Hag succeeds, they can make more money. So maybe it's better to sell the club at a later date and bring in some kind of financing. And of course, that's running through their mind. But every time you get that perspective, there's also the games, because Rain Group's one job is to get the highest possible price for Manchester United. So every single time competitive tension can be created, every single time there's a chance the Glazers will stay, how do the groups react? And this is why there's no exclusivity, because it may prompt the group that says they're not going to make another bid to change their bid and go higher. And you have to give Rain credit in some respects, because April the 28th was so-called final bids, and Qatar have made 2 bids after that. So there's always a chance, even though the groups say that they're not going to go up, that if they really want the football club, they will. And I think that's what makes the takeover so frustrating. So if the Glazers were to stay, it's only because they want to make more money at a later date. And if they go now, it's because somebody's hit a number that's acceptable to them. So they are determined sellers, but it has to be at the right price.
Well, on the back of that news, there's 2 things I wanted to kind of ask you on that. You speak about the Glazers still not having the number that they want and them wanting this higher price that hasn't been put on the table yet. Is there a chance that either group or maybe an outside source could higher their bid, and maybe that's what they're hangering on for? Could there be another bid put in place? And also, is there a chance that, Sheikh Jassim or Sir Jim Ratcliffe could just walk away and be like, we're sick of this process now, and they could leave and pursue something else?
Yeah, there's no indication at this point that the groups will walk away. But as I've said many times, when a group feels they're going to lose, that's the point when they tend to walk away. So the fact that neither's walked away shows you that they still feel that they're firmly in the process. And that is the frustration in all of this. They're 6 feet from the finishing line, but is another group 6 inches from the finishing line? Or is the finishing line going to move further back, which is basically what's happened over the course of the last few weeks and months. And as a consequence, it's quite tough for the groups to understand where they stand, because they're undertaking tasks associated with a preferred bidder, which you'd usually only do in an exclusive period. So undertaking those tasks makes you feel like you're getting closer to winning. But then you see another group, a series of other groups in the race, and think, wow, what are they playing at? So I don't think we're going to get a pullout at this stage. But I've said many times, if 9-2 Foundation feel that they are not going to be successful, it would not surprise me if they walk away before they're informed that they have been rejected. And in any takeover, you usually hear from the loser first, especially a takeover that's this public. We saw this with Chelsea. We learned who the groups were that were still in by process of elimination, because the ones that were out ruled themselves out and started speaking very candidly and publicly about the process. So that may be the case here as well, that a group that is informed or feels that they're not going to be successful is the first one to effectively talk. So that's something to look out for as well. But at this stage, nobody wants to make a storm or a fuss. Qatar have done that once. They said that if they didn't get progress on their offer, they would walk away, they would stop engaging. They tried that tactic, it didn't go down well. The PR on the Qatar side has definitely fractured the relationship on the selling side, because the perspective of the Glazers is that Qatar say one thing via the media, and then it's not the reality in terms of their numbers, in terms of where they're at. So the PR is there to put pressure on the Glazers to sell. And it's a tactic that has irritated both Rain Group and the Glazers throughout the course of this process. So I think now Qatar are being silent. They're playing the game, which tells you that they feel that they might be close. Ratcliffe is doing the same as well. And now we ultimately need to wait and see whether the Glazers show their hand.
Yeah, obviously, as a journalist, you've stated many times that you just come on here and you tell us what you know. But to your knowledge with Qatar, I know that you've kind of got information on both sides of the parties. Would you say they are the more confident party at this point?
I think they're confident that they can beat Ratcliffe, but they're not confident compared to no sales. So I think we discussed this the last time I came on. The options as Qatar see it, and we should stress it's Qatar's perspective, is they are up against a no sale. That is their rival. It's Qatar or no sale. And Jim Ratcliffe is the stalking horse. That is Qatar's perspective. It's been Qatar's perspective for quite some time. So they think all 6 want to sell, and they think this is only about a number, and they believe that they're already miles above the enterprise value of the club, and they're 5 offers in, and they're sticking to their valuation, and they're ready to go. And it's the best offer for the club and the community, and there's pledged investment. And that's Qatar's perspective. So take it or risk the consequences of not taking it and not having anybody match that, and then still being Manchester United and having total uproar and chaos from the fan base. Because if no sale happens, then the Glazers may well be effectively forced by the fan base constantly out of the football club, as they have been anyway during this process. But it may go from verbal protests to something even uglier. It may go to boycotts. It may go to confrontations, because everyone thinks this process is having an ending where the Glazers go. And even though they didn't explicitly promise that, now there's this Qatar offer on the table, which is why Qatar are using it to their advantage in terms of PR. It obviously feels like the best option for many Manchester United fans. And I think Qatar are using that, and no sale clearly wouldn't go down well. But they think it's Qatar or no sale. It's as simple as that, which is why they've grown in a little bit of confidence. But Ratcliffe's perspective is very different, because they're saying to the Glazers, forget the uproar, forget the PR, forget Qatar. We're giving you a flexible option where if you want to stay, you can stay. If you want to go, you can go. If you want to stay and exit in 2 years, you can do that. If you want to go in 5 years, you can do that. Ratcliffe is a deal maker. So Qatar are about, we want 100% of the club. We're bullish. And if you don't take it, then there's no other option. Ratcliffe is about, let's sit in a room and engage directly and find something that works for you. And that stopped him going head to head with Qatar. There's a real point of difference between the two bids structurally. Obviously, the other point of difference is regarding one's debt free, one isn't. One's 100% and one is only for control. So that aspect is what the fan base rightly look at. And this is why a lot of fans feel like Qatar is going to be better for their football club. But if you take that away and just look at the structure, which is the only thing the Glazers are looking at, and the bottom line that they'll receive, Ratcliffe's been quite smart, because he's effectively saying, take away the noise and take away the debt and take away the pledged investment, all vital to Manchester United, but irrelevant in the Glazers' mind, which is terrible, because you would like them to protect the club and do what's best for the club if they're going to exit. But they're only looking at structure that's best for them, money that's best for them. And Ratcliffe is going out of his way to try and give them something that works. And this is ultimately why there's two suitors, because Qatar are going up and up and up. And if they hit a magic number, they'll win. And Ratcliffe is saying, I'll do A, B, C, or D. And the Glazers are saying, okay, that gives us lots to think about. And in the end, if nobody hits the actual valuation, they might turn around and say, okay, neither of you are having the football club, and we'll just take some financing and then we'll put the club on the market at a later date. And I know that's frustrating to the fan base, because they want answers. And I think we as journalists get scapegoated because we can't always give you an answer. But if the Glazers haven't shown their hand to the groups, then they're not going to have shown their hand to the journalists. So good journalism in this takeover process has become about telling somebody it's going to happen tomorrow, or Qatar is going to win. And now I think people that have followed my work and other journalists in the takeover realize that anyone that's jumped the gun has looked a little bit silly, because we're actually nowhere closer as of today to knowing who the winner is going to be.
Ben, sorry, you still there?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Ben's on his hotel internet, everyone, which is why it's a little bit blurry. Are you in New York right now, Ben?
I'm in North Carolina, in pretty much a forest in the middle of nowhere. And then I head to Philadelphia in a few hours. So yeah, apologies, the internet is not great.
Wow, love it on your travels. It must be nice. It must be very nice. But thank you for making the time to go on here with us anyway. We have a super chat in from SK saying, can you ask about the minority shareholders suing the Glazers if they don't sell too?
Yeah, I think the suing aspect is intriguing, because there's that threat and that's pressure, and board approval could be quite tricky, but Ratcliffe's offer is flexible. And when I talk to legal experts, they feel like Ratcliffe might actually win that court case, even though there will be uproar and it could escalate. So this is a little bit messy if the minority shareholders proceed to challenge it. And we know that they've actually written in opposition to kind of pre-warn, but it's a case of whether or not they would actually win a legal case, or whether this is all just about noise. But Ratcliffe still has to get board approval, and he has to walk into Manchester United if he's successful, and not only allow logistical and legal things to be done to get Manchester United Football Club, but also have the fan base on side and also have the minority investors on side. So even if it's possible legally, it's not a good starting point. And as a consequence, he's trying to be as flexible as possible. So I think that the Ratcliffe bid felt dead a few weeks back in its current form. But remember that Ratcliffe has not only got one type of structure, he's got one club valuation, and he's saying we could do it this way, or this way, including, by the way, buying all 69% of the Glazers shares. So don't rule out Ratcliffe, again, expert deal maker, diffusing the situation by pivoting and changing the type of structure that he's prepared to offer in order to give himself the best possible chance of winning, because he just wants control. He just wants victory at all costs. And if that comes in one format, great. If that comes in another format, great. As long as the valuation is what he wants to pay, he's very willing to be flexible with the structure of his deal.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It feels to me, obviously this is just me as a fan looking in, that he's kind of maybe not clutching at straws. That's probably the wrong kind of phrase to use, but he's trying everything he can to stay in this race. And there's a very obvious choice as to who can offer more money, in the sense of, but obviously they only want the whole club. It is intriguing that he's still hanging on to this stake, but we'll have to wait and see. The last question I want to ask on the takeover before we move on to a little bit of transfers is, are we any closer at all, Ben, to knowing when this decision might be made? We know the start of the new season, there's still going to be owners of Manchester United, but are we closer to knowing when this decision will be made? You said the paperwork's are ready to go, so how long after the decision is made do you expect the process to be from there?
I think if they decide to announce it when something is picked or agreed, in other words, before the completion process starts, then it's optimistically 6 weeks, pessimistically 12 weeks. And the actual completion process for both groups is different. So Ratcliffe will be quicker than Jassim, because Jassim has to delist the public shares and take 100% of the club. So it's not a similar path for both, but there is overlap with certain things, including obviously the Premier League owners and directors test. So I think the 12 weeks, which is what we've had out there, would be the maximum, and the minimum could be a little bit shorter than that. But it all just depends on when they announce it. I think it's going to be quite hard to keep a decision under wraps, because things like board approval are needed. But there's effectively 3 different junctures when they could announce it. One is if they were to call it a preferred bidder and have that stage, although that's always been denied. But then you would need exclusive negotiations to get to signature, to get to completion. So then it would be weeks and weeks and weeks. If they then announce it when it's signed and there's break clauses, which means that neither party can really back out, then you just have to do the completion process, including things like the transfer of funds, any merger and acquisitions approvals, and so on. Then I think that you're probably looking at somewhere around 8 weeks if everything goes according to plan. Or, of course, they could try and keep it under wraps and just get it done, which I think is unlikely. But then it may rumble on and rumble on and rumble on, and we may not hear anything. But when we do hear something, it may be very close to actually being totally complete. And that would suggest they're trying to delay any announcement into the actual completion process. I think that we're going to first get a so-called winner, and then it will be minimum, as I say, 6 weeks, maximum 12 weeks from there. And that effectively means that we're going to be well into the season before Manchester United potentially has a new owner.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see the way that they go about this and how it is announced to everyone, because that will need to happen at some point. A lot of people in the chat asking if Qatar will bid again. We did kind of go over that. You said that you wouldn't rule it out, but it's unexpected. If the Glazers turned around and said, and we'll say that we'll do this and then we'll move on to transfers, but if the Glazers turned around and said, do you know what, we've not got enough money, we're going to we're going to get a financial investment instead and carry on being owners, is there a chance then that Sheikh Jassim could go again?
They've always said no, but they said no after the final bid on April the 28th, and then they placed 2 more bids. So the Rain Group are trying to get the highest possible price. As I said before, the whole part of this game is that their one job is to get the maximum amount of money for the Glazers. So anything they can do to at least try and facilitate more offers at higher numbers is part and parcel of what they're being paid for. And as a consequence, we can never rule out an 11th hour bid to get something over the line. But at the moment, the Qatar perspective is that it's take it or leave it, and that they are not waiting for negotiation, they're waiting for a decision. So Qatar again say they're ready, decide. When you've decided, let us know. But this is always going to be a game as long as there are multiple suitors that are currently in the race for Manchester United. And as a consequence, if we're to compare it to anything in terms of transfers, it's at this stage. I've been reticent throughout the whole process to start talking about transfers and takeovers because they're two completely different things. And I think because it's so public, we've looked at this process like transfers for far too long in terms of front runners, in terms of speed. But right now, it's almost like the end stages of a transfer. Like, look at Declan Rice, where Arsenal were so-called front runners, and then suddenly Man City came in, and then suddenly Arsenal decided to go big and blow Manchester City out the water. You could have a scenario like that, where as long as there's two groups, someone feels the need to place a sixth bid. But at the moment, all indications are that the groups are not prepared to do that. And the other thing is, when I talk to sources at both groups, they don't see like for like. Qatar see themselves against No Sale rather than Ratcliffe, and Ratcliffe feels his bid is completely different to Qatar. So if he's successful, it's because the structure of that bid was preferable to the Glazers. And as a consequence, they're trying, both of the groups, not to be seen to be going head to head against each other. If they were, or there were more groups in the race, we might get a bidding war and some late bids. But as long as they're intentionally not getting sucked into the competitive tension, that takes a bit of the power away from the Glazers.
Yeah, really kind of interesting stuff there. I like the comparison. I mean, what's slower, the Glazers' decision making or your internet? Seriously, I'm joking. I'm just making a little joke there, but no, it's crazy that the Glazers are kind of still in this process where they are deciding whether or not the bids are high enough. I can't believe it, but this is where we're at. And I know a lot of people in the chat are a little bit, just frustrated at where this is at, and all we would say is that everybody is, and this is where we're at right now. But the fact that you name it the late stages of the transfer window is not the transfer window of a transfer is kind of giving me a little bit of positivity there. So thank you for that, Ben. But we're going to move into the transfers. So first of all, I wanted to ask you, well, Bruno Fernandes, everyone, he's going to be named as Manchester United captain. So I wanted to get that out into the chat. So Bruno Fernandes is going to be Man United captain, as it's already been announced, hasn't it, Ben?
Yeah, we've known this for quite some time. I think it's smart. It's an indication, obviously, that Harry Maguire's future is up in the air. I think we said this last time, that Manchester United are not necessarily desperate in any way to sell Maguire, but if the right offer and price comes in, then they will obviously respect the player's decision. And even though we're hearing a lot of links with Maguire, I still think there's a lot to run on that. He's disappointed not to be the captain, but he can't be the captain if he's not playing regularly. And I know sometimes we get club captains that kind of are influential figures but don't start week in, week out. That's not the direction of travel that Erik ten Hag wanted to go in. He feels that Bruno Fernandes can lead by example on and off the field. With Harry Maguire, the Chelsea links don't have much substance to them. The West Ham links do, however. So that's one to watch. And Maguire's going to have to decide now whether or not he fights for his place or has diminished game time, or whether he feels that with a view to Euro 2024 and still having a starting centre-back spot, he needs to go elsewhere. So that might still be a possibility for Manchester United to get a fee there, which might, for example, help them in terms of funding something like Rasmus Højlund, because anything Manchester United do now at this point in terms of big money transfers is going to have to stay within financial fair play. So outgoings are really important, but obviously coming back to the captain front, I think Bruno Fernandes will wear his heart on his sleeve. I think that he's respected by his teammates, not just for his football skills, but the way in which he unites a dressing room. And I've heard that many times, that he's one of the first players in terms of in the dressing room and at training to do the rounds, to put his arm around young players, to hold conversations in multiple languages, to make sure that players personally as well as professionally are looked after. These are things he's been doing for quite some time. So I'm told that he's shown these captain-like tendencies over the course of a lot of his tenure at the football club. And this is probably why Erik ten Hag has chosen to give him the armband.
I love that. I love everything you just said, Ben. A really nice little insight into Bruno Fernandes. I love him as a player, and I'm sure a lot of Man United fans are really happy with his captaincy. On Harry Maguire, obviously had the armband stripped off him. I've just seen TalkSport put something out regarding the fact, despite him not being the captain anymore, Erik ten Hag would like him to stay as, like, you know, a centre-back option for him to use. Obviously not a first choice, but definitely in the squad. Where do you think Harry Maguire's future lies?
Yeah, I think there is interest from the Premier League. We've already mentioned that a little bit, but there was a conversation between Maguire and ten Hag, and in that he was obviously informed that he would lose the captaincy and told that he would have diminished game time, but valued because Harry Maguire brings qualities as a leader even without the captain's armband. So it's going to come down to the player. The club are going to be very respectful, from what I'm told. For the right price, they will sell, but there's not a desperation to do so. Because once you accept that you've got Maguire in your squad, if the player becomes happy with that, then I think people look at Maguire through a different prism. The problem with Maguire at Manchester United is just when you shoulder the captaincy at a big club like Manchester United and you're playing and you're potentially inconsistent or making mistakes, there's scrutiny, there's criticism. And a Manchester United captain has to be able to lead by example, not just off the field, but on it as well. And Maguire wasn't doing that consistently. And this is problematic. But as soon as you say not the captain and people start to forget about that 80 million price tag, a very positive influence at the football club. And Erik ten Hag sees that. So every football manager wants depth. Every football manager wants a player that's liked. Every football manager wants a player that's happy coming in when needed, but is not going to be pushing for play time. But that's a rarity within the Premier League. So if Maguire falls into that category, then there's huge respect for him. And Manchester United would not necessarily be forcing him out of the football club. But it's a long window and there will be offers for Maguire because he just adds a lot to teams that can give him that game time and can still keep him in the frame for Euro 2024. So I think that it'd be surprising if by the end of the window there wasn't a more concrete offer for Maguire. But it is true that Manchester United are not necessarily in a rush or an urgency to sell because they respect Maguire. And I think he respects Manchester United and any diminished role that he would have if he stays in the team going forward.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that. It is very interesting to kind of look at Maguire, the captain, compared to Maguire, the player, because as a fourth choice centre-back, he's a decent option. But as your captain starting week in, week out, that's where the problems are coming from. So you summed that up really well there. And it's interesting to kind of have that insight on it. Talking about players maybe coming into the club, Rasmus Højlund is being one that we're talking about as of late, talked about to be the next signing for Manchester United. There was talk today about the price being set at 60 million euros with 7 to 8 million euros add-ons. Personal terms agreed with Rasmus himself. What's your update on this deal? And do you think there's any chance it could happen within, what's the time frame really with it?
Yeah, the time frame is going to be reliant on the structure of the deal, because if it's all cash, then Manchester United will obviously have to find some money and outgoings become important. So now that two have come in for that 100 million figure in Onana and Mount, Manchester United either have to be creative or they have to wait a little bit in order to work out where the funds are going to come from. But Højlund is a very real possibility, and Muani is the other one to watch. And there's kind of these parallel talks taking place as things currently stand for both players. I would say from people I talk to that Højlund is the priority, and the players effectively agreed to the deal. I wouldn't say that personal terms have been 100% agreed in terms of every tiny aspect, but I would say there is a broad or superficial agreement on initial personal terms, which tells you that the base wage is fine. It tells you that the contract length that would be offered is fine. But is there going to be, for example, an optional year? Is there going to be any kind of clause where the player can exit if it doesn't work out? What are the bonuses? Is there the Champions League decrease? And that's quite interesting because Manchester United have always done that. But if a new owner comes in, are they going to continue that? So this is why there's a little bit of uncertainty. But in essence, Højlund would like the Manchester United move. So this is all going to come down to Atlanta and what is the number. And months ago, we heard Manchester United were looking at 35, 45 million euros. I was told that was nonsense, and there's no club in football that thinks that that's possible at that valuation. So now we have to understand whether it's a 60 million euros deal, a 70 million euros deal, or a 100 million euros deal. 100 million euros, I think, is dreamland for Atalanta. I don't think it's going to be that high, but I think Manchester United are going to have to look at a total package of somewhere close to 70 million euros, which is what, about 60 million pounds. If they can hit that number or somewhere close, I think there's a deal to be had. But at the moment, there's a gulf in valuation, which is why Manchester United are exploring multiple targets. So there's a very realistic possibility of this one, but Manchester United will have to walk away if the numbers get too high. And had they, for example, been doing this deal before Mount and before Onana, maybe they'd have a bit more flexibility. And if they really wanted the player, they'd be able to go a bit higher. But now Manchester United are going to have to be really strict and disciplined, which means that if their top end number, whatever that may be, is rejected, then they'll have to walk away from the deal.
Would you say to get this deal done, Man United are going to have to sell players?
I think unless it's a player swap, we saw with Moises Caicedo, even though that was largely games around the Mount deal, that Manchester United was saying they would hit the 70 or 80 million and somehow add 2 or 3 players. So there is that possibility of having your cake and eating it and saying to Atalanta, we'll give you part cash, part player, and then we'll reduce the overall cost. And then they wouldn't need to sell because they're effectively selling through buying. But very rarely in football does a swap deal come off. And almost never in football does a swap deal come off where you've got multiple players in terms of who you're offering. And Atalanta have not been overly interested in any of the players that Manchester United potentially have on the market. So I think if Manchester United proceed, they're going to have to be a little bit more patient on this one. They're going to have to wait to get the finances to do the deal. And yeah, that may require some outgoings first.
Yeah, I mean, one outgoing that looks like it's going to happen is Fred. He's not part of the preseason tour to America. It looks like he is going to go. And apparently Man United, the rumours are that Man United are trying to get that deal done so they can bring in Amrabat. Have you got any news on Amrabat?
Yeah, Amrabat is a Manchester United target. I would also keep an eye on Liverpool, though, as well. We've heard plenty of interest from Spain, too, in terms of Barcelona. I don't think that one's possible at this stage. And also Atletico Madrid. So we have to understand the future of Fred first. And as you say, he's been left out of the pre-season tour. And it looks like Fulham are one of the clubs interested there. I know that we've heard some talk as well about Galatasaray as well. So there's a couple of clubs in the mix to watch, but it is looking likely that Fred will leave Manchester United. And then should he do so, defensive midfield becomes a priority, which is not something that we've really spoken about throughout the course of the window, which is why the Caicedo links originally were quite strange for Manchester United, because there they were chasing Mount and at the same time hinting Caicedo, which is a different kind of midfielder. But now the Fred situation is becoming a little bit more apparent. It may well be that defensive midfield is a priority where Manchester United need to strengthen. So Amrabat's a target. I'm not aware of anything overly concrete at this point, other than the fact that he's on the list. And then still, they'll have to make decisions between whether or not they can get a defensive midfielder and a number 9 without waiting, because outgoings are going to be a big part of what Manchester United do next.
Absolutely. Well, that's some good news. Not good news about Liverpool being interested, but good news that we are kind of shifting our focus to that. Lastly, to kind of wrap up the show, we all saw the pictures of Onana at Manchester Airport, and, he's on his way to New York now to join the squad. It was so funny how he did that little interview before it even got announced. But with Onana, do you have any idea when the announcement could be from Man United, the official one?
I don't know the exact time, but it is obviously imminent. That's fair to say. And I think it's relief, because this has been a key target. Goalkeeper became so important because of the De Gea situation, and we know that Henderson wants out to go to Forest. So you have a situation where Manchester United are in pre-season and they don't have a number 1 goalkeeper. So Onana needed to get done quickly. And Manchester United, by the way, are delighted because they've got a deal done for under 60 million euros, which was always their aim. They've maybe paid 4 or 5 million more than they wanted to, but remember, add-ons are never guaranteed. So it's in that ballpark of Mount plus Onana equals around 100 million, which was always the aim. And Erik ten Hag was very important in this deal because Onana was reassured that he would be the number 1 goalkeeper. And I think that's why De Gea got relatively frustrated by the situation, because if he's considering his future, and Manchester United also obviously considering whether they in the end wanted him to sign that contract, which didn't happen. You have to talk to De Gea in one way whilst you're out in the market exploring Onana in another way. And there was no consistency in De Gea's mind between what he was being told by Manchester United in the build-up to leaving versus seeing how they were moving in the market for clear number one goalkeepers. But Onana's perfect for the Premier League. He's athletic. He's got strong instincts. He's intelligent. He's not afraid to leave his line. And what some would say is take risks in that sweeper keeper kind of manner. And, where De Gea shines, or shone, now past tense, was in the spectacular shot stopping sometimes, but where he was weak, it was in error after error and goals that he shouldn't have let in and did. And goalkeepers undermine themselves like that. Onana's a little bit safer. He's a little bit more reliable, I would say. And there's some areas of leadership and decision making away from that shot stopping that he can develop. So with De Gea, it was sort of poor saves on his line that he should have just kept out. You're not going to get that with Onana. There's no chocolate wrists, from what I'm told, as it's sometimes called within the industry. But where he can improve is when he's off his line in terms of that authority. And I think it'll be a good signing for Manchester United, and I would expect that we'll get the official announcement very soon. But sadly, I don't have a specific time for you.
It's okay. I wouldn't expect you to go as well. I was just being a little bit cheeky there at the end, trying to get that from you. But I mean, we're excited. We're hoping it's today. I have a feeling it might be tomorrow now at this point. But Ben, and also last one is, if Henderson, with this move to Forest, will, if that kind of heats up, I assume he'll be allowed to leave the tour and complete his move.
Yeah, he will. And the thing about Henderson is that unless he was going to be crowned the number one, he always wanted to leave. So there's no real surprise there. And I think that one will move very quickly from Manchester United's perspective, because you can't keep a player when you know that they ultimately want to be elsewhere.
Yep, exactly. But look, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, all the way from America, you're in your hotel and you've still managed to be here. And we really appreciate your updates on the channel. So thank you for being here and giving us the updates. Hopefully, eventually, when it does happen, we can't wait for the show and we get you on for that, when eventually the sale does happen and we can all kind of celebrate together. But thank you, Ben, for being on with us.
Half on with you. From what I gather from the chat, I'm blurry, I'm pixelated, and I don't know why you're all complaining. It's an improvement. If you see me in 4K, that's the worst possible visual imaginable. If you're seeing me in the lowest possible resolution, that's probably better visually on the eyes. So maybe the crap internet is a good thing.
Don't say that, Ben. Do not put yourself down. Do not. We definitely prefer seeing you in full HD vision, but at least we've got you here. And, guys, everyone was asking why it took so long. He was busy dialing up his internet. That's why. But thanks, Ben, for being here. And, yeah, have a really safe trip to, was it Washington you're going to?
Yeah, I go to Philadelphia first, actually, for Chelsea against Brighton, and then to Washington. So a nice little American tour on the East Coast.
Love it. Love it. I'm very jealous. But thank you for being here. And I'm sure I'll have more updates for you soon. Everybody, make sure you go and check out Ben's work on, obviously, he puts updates and stuff on Twitter, but he also works with CBS, don't you, Ben? So everyone go in, check that out. But thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for all the comments. Quickly before I go, I want to say thank you, Zoosh, Damo, BHK, Trevin, SK, Chris Johnson, Adventures, for all the super chats. So thank you, guys. Have a lovely afternoon, and hopefully we get a Nana soon. We'll see you on the next one.